Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Hashira Half Hour. I am Emily, your resident Rengoku fangirl. So excited to see our boy today. And as always, I am joined by Bryan and Hannah.
What's up, y'all? It's Bryan. If you can't see me, I'm serving Muichiro realness because I am same hair color and equally as clueless as that man is. Poor child, really. But nonetheless, we're rocking it out.
Hey everyone, it's Hannah, and as of the time of recording this, we are approximately 3 days away from a new trailer for season 3, and I might actually cry. I'm so excited.
It's going to be so good.
Fingers crossed for some kind of release date information in
I
the
know.
trailer.
Let us know in the comments when you think it's coming out. Because I don't know. I'm hoping early spring.
March 2023. I'm putting that into existence right now.
Boom. St. Patrick's Day. Demon Slayer. Something like that.
I was hoping because it's the Love Hashira, they would do like Valentine's Day as the start date.
It
That
wouldn't
would be fun.
I feel like based off of my extensive knowledge of how they release trailers, we've already gotten 2 teasers, so this should be like the final big one. And usually it's like a month or 2 afterwards. So
here's hoping. I feel like a lot of programming starts in like January, but I wonder if that might be too fast. But we'll see. That would be great, but we'll see what actually happens. So, but that's for another day. We'll talk about the trailer probably next time. Today's discussion is going to focus on episode 22, Master of the Mansion. In this episode, we are meeting some of the most VIP characters of the show, and this expansive cast is nothing to scoff at. We're finally getting a glimpse at the elusive Hashira and the even more elusive Master. So for this episode, I'd like to focus on a theme of rules. Obviously, there's a lot of rules in this world. Many of them are in place for a number of reasons. Generally, they tend to be good ones, if enough people have done something that has caused a rule to be created. So rules are important in this episode. Our episode does kick off with each of the Hashira standing watch over a barely conscious Tanjiro as they prepare to observe him standing trial for the crime of traveling with a demon. Each Hashira gives a very vocal opinion on where they stand on this matter and this rule being broken. Which of them stood out the most and why?
oh my goodness. I disliked almost every single one of them. I'll be honest, like the introduction of most of these Hashira, ooh, they got under my skin. I actually recently watched this with my sister too, and she was just like, why are they all being so mean to him? I was like, well, they don't understand where he's coming from. But the one that stood out to me most, I think would have to be Mitsuri, because she was the only one who was like nice to him outside of like Giyu, who was just kind of standing off to the side, and Shinobu was being nice to him as well. But like out of the ones that we just met in this episode, Mitsuri was the only one who was like, oh, like how sweet, like brave. And I was like, all right, I'm gonna like this chick. Everyone else, ugh.
Damn. Yeah, honestly, I was kind of surprised by all of them. They all had like a different take on it. The one that stood out to me the most didn't even have relevance to the point. It was Muichiro. He was like, what kind of cloud is that? I forgot. What's the name? What are we talking about? And he was literally so off task. Honestly, I was like, how are you a Hashira? Like, how do you even remember the mission? Is there like a document they give you, like endpoint, a little map where it shows like a demon and like little horns right here? Like, what are you doing here?
I think this is kind of a fun question. I know I wrote it, but like, but they all stand out. That's the thing. It's like they're all supposed to be so elusive, but they're all like so boldly colored and very vocal in this scene. So I have to agree with both of you. I think that each stood out. To me, I have to say, like, obviously we know my favorite is in this episode, and he definitely, like, just in his character design and vocal prowess, like, he stands out. But he's not the first one that came to mind for me. I think it has to be Sanemi for me, because he literally makes his own bold entrance. We'll get to this later, but bold and brash. Let's call him that. So
wild, absolutely wild.
Literally a very motley crew that we have here. Maybe not what I initially expected the Hashira's first impression to be. Now, regardless of where each of these Hashira stand on the actions of Tanjiro and Nezuko, and regardless of how we feel as an audience and like the background story that we have, they don't have all of that background yet. And we know that, again, like many rules, they're put into place for a reason. Demon Slayers, and particularly the Hashira, live by a strict code to protect humanity from the devastation that the demons and Muzan have brought forward into this world. So to protect one and travel with one is unheard of at this point. Knowing that, and knowing that they don't know Tanjiro and Nezuko's background, do you think that their reactions to defend these rules were too harsh?
No. Thinking about it, right? Like, they don't have context, right? And I think something kind of that we can talk about later in this episode too is that, like, right, you don't know both sides. Like, the side that they're demonstrating to the Hashira in that moment is like, hey, we're innocent, like, we're gonna help, we're gonna be like great demon slayers together. Equally so, the Demon Slayer Corps has gone through a lot over its time, right? And so with that being said, we know that there's also like the equal probability that they're lying, that they're aligned with Muzan, that they are really here to infiltrate the Demon Slayer Corps. There's no telling from their standpoint. They are overall doing their job as a safeguard. However, immediate calls to kill, maybe that was a little harsh, but I do think that I really aligned myself with like Rengoku in the sense of like, okay, let's get them a trial. Like, he said, like, I am here to help them stand trial. Aha.
Yeah, I think that their reactions were harsh after a while of him trying to explain, but also it made sense with, like, we get the idea that they're probably all coming from backgrounds of not great experiences with demons. And Tanjiro, we've talked about it, is like the only person so far that has this experience with Nezuko, seen demons that don't hurt people, because none of them have met Tamayo or Yushiro either. And so Tanjiro has this completely different perspective that the Hashira we're just now meeting. We've spent these 21 episodes prior to this with Tanjiro, so we're obviously going to be on his side, but that doesn't mean that everyone is. And I want to bring up kind of Avatar Last Airbender again, because it's something that comes up a lot in conversation with that as well. I see so many people like kind of hate on Katara for being so untrusting of Zuko when he joins the team in the second half of season 3. And it kind of goes along the same vibes of that. She was not able to spend all this time that we have as an audience to see him go through that redemption that, he did. She only saw him from season 1, and then the end of season 2, we all know how that worked out. So it kind of goes along with the same thing. We have spent this time with this character, so we understand and we want to root for him, but we also have to take a viewpoint of the Hashira who have not spent that time with him. So I think it's kind of in the middle. They got a little harsh at the end there, but still a little bit warranted.
Yeah. I do think it's fair. How can you trust something that you've never experienced before and that, to their knowledge, is unheard of, I think, at this point? It's hard to have an impartial opinion, I think, as the audience that has like gone through this journey, primarily with Tanjiro. But it's, these Hashira have risen through the ranks for good reason. They've defended these rules, and this is like the code by which they live their life. So to ask them to stray from that is like to ask them to go against their very nature. So I don't think that I fault them for reacting so strongly. But it's hard to see our boy get beat up a little bit like that. Again.
You're telling me.
I know. Poor Hannah. Yeah. It
reminds me of another protagonist who gets whipped a little bit by his future leadership. Won't say who, but
I feel like this is definitely a Naruto thing.
No, certainly isn't.
Wow. Okay.
I actually don't know which one it is then.
We can cut it if it's too big of a spoiler, but when Aaron gets his ass whipped by Levi.
Oh.
I don't think that's a spoiler. That's season 1. That's season
Okay.
1. He gets like kicked in the
Yeah.
mouth. So
Yeah.
That's like a 10-year-old story there, right there.
I know if that's a spoiler, then like I'm sorry, but the rest of us been new. So oh man. All right. Well, our protagonist getting beat to crap aside, uh Tanjiro's getting beat up a little bit more verbally than physically too, but the Hashira I think start to lose focus on him and begin to argue amongst themselves as well, because they're all very vocal and determined in their opinion, but they don't quite agree exactly on the approach for everything. So they're arguing amongst themselves. As this happens, the person that I mentioned joins the crowd for the first time. We have Sonomi coming in, and he has probably out of all of them the most aggressive approach, entering the scene with Nezuko's box literally in hand. He calls Tanjiro delusional despite hearing out his story as he's walking over along with the other Hashira, and he stabs Nezuko's box. So this pisses off Tanjiro pretty quickly, and we get to see our boy once again use his head and knock him out. Mama said knock you out. He tells him that Tanjiro tells Sonomi that he shouldn't be a demon slayer if he can't tell the difference between a good or a bad demon. We've talked about this a lot before. The line between good and bad is very blurred in this show. And so does Tanjiro have a point? To Sonomi's credit, has there ever been a good demon before? How would a Hashira be able to tell? Or is it as simple as intuition? What do you guys think?
I think really, I mean, as an audience member, you don't know. I mean, we can assume, or I would like to assume, that Sonomi is aware of Lady Tamayo's presence, right? Because we've already met her. Tanjiro has met her. We have the cat scene, right? So there's a certain amount of evidence to believe that he could know about this. So, like, obviously, that's a very large exception, right? Him or Tamayo and Yushiro. But, right, if you have that exception in the mind, maybe there's more than one exception, and maybe it's its own branch of ruling within, like, ethics and judging demons. Now, Sonomi does not seem like the person to give too much about second thoughts. He's more of a ask for forgiveness instead of permission type person from our first impression here. So I honestly don't think he thinks about good demons. He thinks about what he wants and then faces repercussions later. And so I think that's why he's very different. He is introduced as the Wind Hashira too, and so maybe a little bit of a allusion to his character down the line of being wind, being with the wind and with the moment.
Okay. Surprisingly, I am not fully going to take Tanjiro's side in this. I know that might shock you because I tend to defend my boy. But it's kind of like I touched on with the last answer, you know, like these Hashiras have never experienced what Tanjiro has. They've never experienced a good demon. For all we know, Tamayo, Yushiro, and Nezuko are the only like good demons in the world. They're the only ones that have not continually devoured people and tried to kill them. And Tanjiro is the only human, let alone demon slayer, in the world that's experienced this before. So he's kind of looking at this situation very one-sided, which is okay. He is a 15-year-old boy who we know will defend his sister no matter what, and he is watching his sister get stabbed by a fellow demon slayer. So, like, I understand him doing that. I understand him saying that. Do I necessarily agree with what he said? Not necessarily, because he's just seeing red. He's not seeing the full situation like he usually does, because it has to do with his sister. Kind of like when he decided to start fighting Inosuke and kept on saying like it's taboo for demon slayers to fight, and yet he was still fighting him, you know? So he still has those moments where it's like, but I will say this. Sanmi was way too aggressive for me in this moment, and I did not like him. He was my least favorite by far at this moment. I was like, bruh, you don't need to be that dramatic.
He is a dramatic boy. To Bryan's point, the wind Hashira. He's almost more like a Tasmanian devil rolling in on the scene. Wreaking
Did get
havoc.
those vibes, very much those vibes at that moment.
And it's like he is following the rules technically, but he's really, really teetering on the edge of what's questionable behavior because, like you said, Hannah, like the other Hashira, like all kind of shared the same opinion that we as the audience think is wrong, but like nobody's actually lifted a hand to either of them yet beyond like tying up Tanjiro, I guess.
Yeah.
And he comes in all crazy. So
and even Shinobu got angry, though the Hashira who's just like smiled this whole time and tried to kill Nezuko a couple episodes ago was like getting angry
I know.
with Sanemi. So it's like
let her RBF come out.
Yeah.
Oh man. And Tanjiro too. He's even breaking his own rules a little bit here. I think Nezuko's his soft spot, but
it definitely like his weakness.
Rules don't apply when it's somebody that you love. So nice. So obviously we've got like all of our chaotic boys on the scene. We've got both of them like struggling to stand up now after Tanjiro smashing, like just crazy. Before complete chaos breaks out and everyone devolves into a slapstick fight scene, the master of the mansion arrives and the mood changes entirely. Everyone is bowing at his entrance, and the Hashira beg an explanation for what's going on at this point, to which the master indicates that he has already sanctioned the journey of Tanjiro and Nezuko, and he hopes that the Hashira will agree to his wish. We see that agreement does not come so easily. What do you think of their reactions? This is the master now saying the same thing, and they're still sticking to the rules.
Yeah, I mean, I was definitely surprised that he very calmly stated this and then they continued to push back because those few minutes leading up to that moment, you could tell that they all respected him like crazy. And I want to call that out really quick because I think it's really cool to see the parallels now that we've been introduced to the master of the Demon Slayer Corps. We've only seen Muzan and, the way he masters the demons, but now we're seeing the master of the Demon Slayers. And just like the differences between clear respect for their leader and clear fear of their leader and how each one, controls their people. I found so interesting, those parallels. But then the Hashira are like, I respect your opinion, but I don't agree. And I was like, oh, okay, they're really sticking with this. So again, it just goes back to like, we know, or we can understand that probably most of these people have experienced some kind of issue at the hands of demons. Maybe personally, obviously they have on the battlefield since they've been clearly fighting demons for a long time, being at this level of Demon Slayer. And that's years and years of this experience. And now this is challenging that to like the opposite degree of what they've known. So it makes sense that they would still respectfully tell him, I don't agree.
I think with this scene, right, it's very much so similar to like, I'm trying to think how to word this. I think with this scene, I think it comes down to almost really looking at like where they come from in their Demon Slayer experiences, right? Like where they are right then in that moment. I think there's a lot of things that we don't know. One thing that we did learn though, right? When Mitsuri was being essentially she acted as kind of our like narrator for this episode. I do want to call that out because she was like, oh my God, this person's doing this and this person's doing that. Da, da, da. But, like to Sanemi, right? Like she noted, oh, those new scars make him look so much more beautiful, right? Like these people are coming fresh off the battlefield every time, and then they're coming home to the same threat. I think they're not entirely sure of why. They understand and respect like that their master has said this, but also in the same breath, like it's like when you're at work and your leadership makes a decision that you don't agree with. I mean, like it happens, right? And so with that being said, like there's obviously going to be that pushback. And that pushback is reasonable, I guess, because when you've been told this entire like rule set, their nature that they've built in missions, in outside of missions, just living together maybe at the mansion, and then your master's like, everything you learned incorrect. So like it's just a very different perspective for them to be in, and I think it doesn't align, and I think they need like a full-blown explanation.
It makes sense. They haven't been provided with a why, if you will. Just like, this is what I said. Please agree to it because I've said so. Even though he doesn't seem like very domineering. It's clear, I think, that they have an immense amount of respect for him, and it's clear that he's at the head of the food chain as well. But it seems that he's open to hearing their opinions, even if he's not going to change his mind. That like there's not going to be repercussions for them vocalizing their concerns. So guess that's the perks of being a Hashira. But he does follow up with a little bit more of a why, right? Like right after their initial disagreements. And we get to hear a letter read that was sent by Urokodaki, which is a fun callback. We haven't talked about him in a little while. And we know something that we know about him too is that he's a retired Hashira. So obviously he's probably still held in very high esteem, like an honorary member, and also somebody who survived that long to be a retired member of the Hashira. Somebody whose opinion would weigh heavily, I think, on the master's mind, and clearly has. We hear this letter, and it details the journey of Tanjiro and Nezuko and their time on the mountain with him, Tanjiro's training and the final selection, and Nezuko staying with Urokodaki and his own observations of Nezuko's behaviors. He mentions in this letter that she's never consumed human flesh. She was asleep for over 2 years, and to avoid consuming that human flesh. And more importantly, than him even giving his word, if she ever did consume that human flesh, he also mentions in this letter that Tanjiro and Giyu would atone for this by committing seppuku. Bad way to go, but more importantly, Giyu also agreed to this. You can see Tanjiro become emotional in this moment because this is the first time that he's hearing about this too. What are your thoughts?
Oh God, I just thought awful things. So y'all remember that Vine? You either get killed or kill yourself. Which
oh my God.
do? I mean, no, but really, like honestly, Giyu agreeing to this as well as Urokodaki and Tanjiro, right? All three of them in this like even worse than Romeo and Juliet style pact with each other about Nezuko. It's a very strong feeling, right? You have a former Hashira, you have a current Hashira, and you have this baby Mizunoto all agreeing to this demon's life. I think really what helps this situation is as they, talk through it and stuff, Urokodaki is really like saying, okay, like that's fine. Like you guys don't believe in this, but we have 3 people who are willing to bet their lives on this. And are you guys able to offer a stronger argument and counter it? And I think that's what kind of silences the Hashira's concerns about it, is that no one else can really offer a better argument than that. And I think that's why it's really interesting to see how all of them have really committed to Tanjiro's story. And he's really gotten the buy-in of these 2 other Hashira. And now it really comes to this breaking point for him where he needs to get the rest of the Hashira on board with him. And I think that's kind of cool that he's, in front of them and he's getting his chance to definitely show that this could be a good thing for the core.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I have a lot of thoughts on Giyu, but most of it has to come from the manga, so I don't say much. But there's a reason he's my favorite Hashira. I think that we've seen so much of this just quiet, kill the demons. We were talking about it a couple episodes ago when it came to him and Shinobu. It was Shinobu who kept on talking about like, oh, what if demons could be our friends? And he was just like, no, kill them. They're going to kill people. But yet now we're starting to see that this experience that happened 2 years ago for him, when he met Tanjiro and Nezuko the first time, has weighed so heavily on his heart that he is willing to die for this. And like Bryan said, I think, that's finally what is able to kind of quiet down the other Hashira, except for one, which I know we're going to talk about in a minute. Because I don't think there's any greater argument than staking one's life on something that you believe in. If I am willing to literally die because I believe in this thing, then what kind of counter argument will really fight that? Because I clearly believe this so much that I'm staking my life on it. And we obviously know that Tanjiro would in a heartbeat, but even like the expectation that Urokodaki would do the same thing was extremely powerful as well. He has all this experience. He's a retired Hashira, so I think it's really, really powerful. And it made me very emotional too, to see them kind of get behind Tanjiro and Nezuko in this moment.
Right. They're rallying behind him when nobody else will. And Giyu really was the first supporter because he's the one that sent him to Urokodaki in the first place. So it is like a quiet sort of agreement, but he doesn't owe Tanjiro and Nezuko anything. He just quietly feels strongly enough about it to up the ante and stake his life on the chance that his intuition is correct and that something about these siblings is different than anything that he's encountered. And that's a very strong belief. So
if anything, it's reverse. If anything, Tanjiro and Nezuko owe him the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Literally. They owe him everything, because if it weren't for him, like, who knows where the story would have gone.
They would have been goners, clearly,
yeah,
according to the other Hashira. So, but there is something special about this sibling duo. And slowly as the story develops, we're going to begin to unwind more and more, but hopefully we will not need to see anybody commit any kind of seppuku anytime soon.
Fingers crossed on that.
I know, but this isn't the only thing. Like one Hashira, one former Hashira have staked their lives on this sibling duo. But again, this isn't the only thing that allows them to stand out. And as nice as it is that they're backing him up, I also do think that the master is smart enough that perhaps this wouldn't have been enough for him alone as well. The thing that's different, that continues to separate Tanjiro and Nezuko, is that he's the only person present in this scene that has ever encountered Muzan directly. Do you think that shifts the Hashira's opinion of Tanjiro in any way?
Yes, we see it in their faces. They go from being like, to what? I believe no one has encountered Muzan for thousands of years. And something that Tanjiro might have seen as, obviously is important to him to, experience that and see him because he is the man who killed his family. It might still be like, not until now, Tanjiro thought nothing of it. Okay, I saw the king of demons. Does he know that that's the case at this point? So it's like, I don't think he really saw importance in it, but all the other Hashira none of them have really encountered upper moons yet either. So it's definitely wild to them and definitely distracted them because they started just asking him questions about Muzan, like completely forgetting the conversation leading up to it. They were just like, what kind of powers? Where is his lair? Blah, 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 blah. It's like, wait, what happened to Nezuko? No one knows anymore because we're talking about this. So it definitely shifted the conversation very quickly and interestingly, for sure.
I think I was watching this morning, and I think that Rengoku's face is now embranded into my brain from seeing that, because I saw his eyes just go And I was like, surprise Rengoku. It's my new reaction to everything. Also, everyone's asking him these questions and they're literally like shaking him to death on the ground. Like, do you like, I think that was awesome because they're like trying to get all this information out of him, but they were also like choking him to death. And Shinobu had already offered the water with the like supplements in it to make him feel better, but still, he was just getting like wrecked over there, nonetheless, on the ground. With the Hashira, though, I think it's important because they understand what that actually means. Like Hannah said, right? Like, I don't think he understands fully the scope of like Muzan's power and reach. Like, we've seen that he has control over most of these demons, but like knowing control versus knowing like what that control looks like on every level is very different. And so I think Tanjiro in this moment is finding out a little bit more about how valuable he is to the team, right? Like he's understanding that, oh, I have a lot of experiences that most other people don't at this point. And so really I could make it out alive. So I think he's also running through his brain, like, what are my next steps now? Like, how am I going to prove myself going forward? Like once they let me off the ground.
100%. I think that there is a shift in their opinions here of Tanjiro, but I wonder if it's a little bit more of just intrigue than like I'm going to fundamentally change my mind entirely in this moment about the rules that I've lived my entire life and that have gotten me to this point. I think they're just like a little bit more interested in the what's the word here?
Novelty.
They're just interested in this new kid that's like kind of taken them by surprise. The novelty of it. I do think it's going to take some more time, and I think that's part of the fun of our journey as the audience, is that we get to see them slowly warm up one by one over the course of the rest of the story. I don't know that their respect has immensely improved in this one moment.
I think they're more jealous than anything. I think they're almost like, why is this kid able to like find him when we can't, when we're Hashira? And like, I think most of them, even though they don't really know what he's capable of, want to like witness him and get to fight him. So I think it's mostly jealousy, truly.
Jealousy. But I do think that he's much more on their radar as somebody to take a little bit more seriously now, between this and him actually knocking Sanemi out. They were all kind of surprised that he was able to land a blow a little bit earlier. And so they're like, all right, so this kid can fight and catch one of us off guard, which is a big deal. And he's the only one that's met Muzan. So maybe there's a little bit more to him than what meets the eye, but he's still a diamond in the rough. So still got some work to do. All of this, though, is not enough for Sanemi, who decides at this point that he needs to tempt Nezuko in front of everybody to truly tell for himself if the circumstances are true. He brings her inside so that she's in the dark, but she's already injured. He releases her from the box, and he wounds himself to tempt her with the scent of his blood. This is where the episode ends. We just see her eyeing him hungrily. What do you think? What's coming next?
I mean, I think, right, this was the scene where, I think this is directly after, I kind of brought it up prematurely, but right, like this is the scene where Ubuyashiki is asking, like, does anyone have a better argument then? Right. And so, I mean, while Sanemi is and probably will always be bottom two of the Hashira for me, come for me in the comments later. This is exactly why, because first off, like, can't you just have some faith in him? But I do still respect him for like, okay, like maybe I don't have a better argument, but I mean, he said, let's mess around and find out. Like, he was willing to take the risk, and him knowing how demons work, like, he very easily could turn into a demon in the next episode. Like, first time watching this, you don't know what's going to happen. So I think really interesting moment here where he's like calling the bluff.
Yeah, I agree. I think that while it was dramatic, like we've talked about with him, and he still is getting under my skin because of just how like crazy he's being and mean, the master did just say, if any of you can, give us a counter to, what's happened, the 2 years of no eating humans and 3 people putting their lives on the line, then I'll consider it. So Sanmi was like, okay, here's my argument. And I can't fault him for that. He is just trying to prove his side of it because he doesn't believe that Nezuko doesn't eat humans. He thinks that all these people are lying, or, which I get. I just don't like the way he's doing it. He's just being too mean about it.
Yeah. And we know that we all love Tanjiro and Nezuko, but I will say, Hannah, in Sanemi's defense, of everybody that's there, he probably likes them the least because he also got like shown up in an embarrassing way. And it's like, so he's being defensive, I think.
Exactly.
He really like needs to be right in this moment, and we'll find out next week if he is. But I think that's about all that we have for right now. We can move into our favorite moments unless anyone wants to add anything else. Good week meeting our motley crew for the first time, and I'm excited to get to know all of them a little bit more. But for the sake of time, let's go ahead and transition into those favorite moments. I'll go first. So the obvious answer here is probably just getting to see Rengoku a little bit, but the truth is he's also kind of a jerk in this episode. Probably the most by the book character, for the right reasons, I think. Truly just like about honor and everything. So I can't fault him either, but he's also like on the wrong side of history here. So him. Not actually my favorite moment though. I really liked getting to see all the Hashira for the first time, and again, all those rich character designs, getting to hear them all speak. But in particular, I always like the stupid little jokes. And so I liked Tanjiro's little internal monologue about Sanemi being like an idiot that can't speak well, and then like bowing down for the master and speaking so eloquently. He's like, what just happened? Like, where'd the other guy go? It was like very brief, but I loved that.
I also was laughing at that internal monologue because I was like, Tanjiro, he's like, he didn't have a drop of intellect before this. Like, okay, bro, just because he's being mean to your sister, like, relax. Like, let's take it down a notch. You're getting a little dramatic here, starting to match his. I definitely agree. I loved that moment. I really loved when the letter was read and it was stated that Gyu and Urokodaki were putting their lives on the line, but we already talked about it. So I really, and we haven't talked about him at all, Obenai's introduction with the electric guitar. I was like, okay, like, just to go along with the really interesting introductions of all these characters, we can tell that they're all very interesting characters and have, probably going to be much more important to the story than we've seen so far. And his just stuck out to me. He's like in the tree with the snake, being all dramatic and pointing, and there's this electric guitar playing. I was like, all right, okay, I see you.
He said, I'm a snake.
Oh, like a snake.
Lizzie Snake. I forgot how much I liked him. That was going to be like my runner-up. I'm like, because we haven't, spoiler, but he still is not in it that much yet. Not yet. He will be. And I really like him. He's a lot of fun. He's like another like dark-haired broody character, and we always love those.
And yet him and Gyu do not get along whatsoever, even though they're like same thing, different font.
For me, I think Guillaume is part of my favorite here. Reason being, he's the only one really approaching it from an empathetic standpoint. Like, he's approaching this entire situation with the like mindset of, hey, like, these kids are suffering. Like, let's put them out of their misery. Like, he's the only one kind of thinking at it with the mindset of like, okay, like, these people are humans, they're still fault worthy, and nonetheless, like, we are the demon slayer Hashira, we are the ones that set things right, but we can at least do it with a kind heart. And I think that's what's really sweet about him, is like, he's really trying to get where they're at, but also like, you can see that there's something different about him with the way his eyes are painted, are animated, and I think that's really interesting too. And he's also has the beads around his hands, which also gives us a little bit more of an elusive start to his character. So I think it's a lot of interesting things adding up at once.
100%. He's like the gentle giant of the group.
We didn't even talk about Tengen being all flamboyant.
I know. He really was too, but
Tengen was hella rude this episode.
He
honestly,
was.
so was everybody, and I think that that's going to make all of their arcs when we get to them so much more fun because it allows them to be a little bit warmer than what we've seen. Not a good first impression, basically.
It was a very rough introduction to pretty much all these characters, including Rengoku. Like all of them were just being a little bit intense.
And even Mitsuri was like the nicest one of the group, but at the time watching it initially, it's like almost like what's wrong with this one because she's the only one having this internal monologue, and it also was starting to veer a little bit into like the kind of questionable like female territory a little bit that happens with anime characters, but we'll get to that. So all right, I think that's about all the time we have. Anything else before we close it out?
Just Muichiro being clueless AF.
I know. Don't get Hannah started.
What?
TikTok has ruined Muichiro for Hannah.
I'll reserve that judgment for later.
Oh my gosh. We're getting there, guys. All right. Thank you again for another great week. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, do all the things. If you leave us a question or a comment, you might get to see us answer it in a future episode. We appreciate you listening in today, and we will see you all next time. Umai.
Umai.
Umai.